I'm 88 years old. I ended up in a care facility because two of my own children persuaded a judge that their father had lost his mind. I live in room 4 of a senior living center in Ohio. I've been here for nearly a decade. I have 3 children, 6 grandchildren. I am not losing my mind. I am not helpless. I am not the man my children described to that judge. But I have spent almost 10 years in this room because of a lie that was never challenged in front of me. I founded Harlan Construction in 1974 with an $18,000 loan from a regional bank in Columbus and a handshake agreement with a man named Gene Fowler, who held 4 parcels on Riverside Drive. I was 41. Had been doing carpentry and framing since I was 17. I was tired of raising walls for other men's visions. Eleanor and I had been married 13 years by then. She was the one who looked me in the eye and said, "Frank, either build the company or stop dreaming about it." So I built it. First year, 2 houses and nearly nothing left in the bank. Second year, 5 houses. By 1987, I had 45 employees, commercial work, and a name that carried weight across central Ohio. Let me tell you something about a name. It takes a lifetime to build one, and about 3 days to have someone tear it down. I know because I watched it happen from a hospital bed. Eleanor and I had 3 children. Robert came in 64. Sandra in 67, Thomas in 71. Robert was intelligent, the kind of intelligent that cuts through a room, useful, until that edge turns toward you. Sandra was the kind of person who waited to see which direction the crowd moved before forming an opinion. And Thomas was the one who walked into my office at 15. And started organizing the supply room without being asked. By 26, he was managing job sites. By 32, he was my right hand, not because he was my son, because he showed up every single day and earned it. I have never handed anything to anyone. You earn what you get from Frank Harlan, or you don't get it at all. That principle is exactly what lit the fuse on all of this. Let me tell you something about money. When you don't have it, it's all you think about. When you do have it, it's all everyone around you thinks about. I watched that money shape my children in 3 completely different directions. Thomas understood it as duty. Sandra treated it as a cushion. Robert treated it as something already owed to him. Long before I had given a single thought to dying, my oldest son was running numbers in his head about what came next. Eleanor passed on February 19, 2017. Pancreatic cancer, 54 years of marriage. She was the only person alive who could tell me I was making a mistake without me getting up and walking out of the room. After the funeral, I sat alone in my office at Harlan Construction, looked at the framed permits from 1974, the photographs, the company's first invoice mounted on the wall, and I thought, I need to get this right. In March 2017, I sat down with my attorney, Gordon Mills. I told him I wanted to revise my will. Thomas would receive 60% of the company and the family property. Robert and Sandra would each receive 20%. I was not punishing anyone. Thomas had been operating the company for 16 years. Robert was a financial consultant in Cincinnati who came by twice a year and acted like it was a personal sacrifice. Sandra had been living in Tennessee and hadn't been inside the office since 2001. You leave a company to the person who helped you build it. That is not favoritism. That is just sound judgment. Gordon filed the revised will on April 28, 2017. Somehow, I still cannot explain how, Robert knew within weeks. Whether he called Gordon's office or had someone keeping an eye on things, I cannot say, but by June my oldest son was across from me at a restaurant in Dublin, telling me he was worried about my mental sharpness. I told him, "Robert, I just renegotiated a $14 million project portfolio. My mind is exactly where it needs to be." He said, "Dad, you've been making strange choices since Mum died." Strange choices. He meant the will. He couldn't bring himself to say it plainly, so he dressed his greed in the clothes of concern and handed it to me like I was supposed to be grateful. I sat across from my son and realized, for the first time clearly, that the man in front of me was not worried about his father. He was worried about his cut. But Robert, sitting in that restaurant performing the role of concerned son, is not what put me in this room. What he orchestrated over the following 4 months is what did it. And when I tell you what he was willing to pay for, you will understand exactly who my oldest son decided to become the moment he realized his inheritance was being redirected. In August 2017, Robert arranged for a geriatric psychiatrist named Dr. Mitchell Crane to conduct what he described as a routine cognitive assessment for estate documentation, he told me. Just something the attorneys needed on file. I sat in that man's office for nearly 2 hours. Memory exercises, pattern recognition, clock drawing tests. I built a $14 million operation from nothing, and a man 25 years younger than me was asking me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I did it without hesitation, looked straight at him. 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. I said, "Should I continue, doctor?" He smiled and made a note. 2 months later, I found out what that note said. Dr. Crane's report concluded that I demonstrated marked cognitive deterioration consistent with early-stage dementia, and that I lacked the capacity for sound financial decision-making. That report was fiction. Every word. I sat in that office and performed every task without error. And that man wrote that my mind was failing because my son had paid him $38,000 to write it. $38,000. That is what my son decided Frank Harlan's mind was worth. Less than a new pickup truck. In October 2017, Robert filed a petition for guardianship with the Franklin County Court. He submitted Dr. Crane's evaluation as his primary evidence. Sandra co-signed. 2 of my 3 children stood before a judge and testified that their father was no longer capable of managing his own affairs. Thomas opposed the petition. He stood in that courtroom and said, "Your Honor, my father is in that office every morning. I see him work. I see how he thinks. There is nothing wrong with Frank Harlan's mind." The judge set a full evidentiary hearing for February 2018. I retained my own legal counsel. I intended to fight this in open court, to sit in front of that judge and demonstrate, without question, that every accusation in that petition was a fabrication. I never got the opportunity. January 14th, 2018. I was at my desk reviewing site drawings for a mixed-use development on Sawmill Road, 8 commercial units. The blueprints were rolled out in front of me and my coffee had gone cold. My left arm went heavy, then the left side of my face. Then the words in my head stopped reaching my mouth, like a signal cut off mid-transmission. Stroke. Severe hemorrhagic stroke. Thomas found me on the office floor 35 minutes later. My cheek was pressed against the site plans for a building I would never see finished. I regained consciousness at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center on January 20th, 2018. I could see, I could hear, I understood everything happening in that room and in the corridor beyond it. But I could not form a single spoken word. I could not lift my right hand. I could not sign my own name. My mind was fully present and completely sealed off from the outside world. A man pounding on the walls of a room with no exit, and no one able to hear him. And what did my son Robert do while his father lay in that bed, aware of everything, able to communicate nothing? He moved like someone who had been preparing for exactly this moment. Robert filed for emergency guardianship on January 22nd, 4 days after I regained consciousness. He submitted Dr. Crane's report alongside my medical records, documenting that I could neither speak nor write. The court granted it in 4 days. 4 days. 43 years of building something from nothing, and a judge transferred authority over my life to my oldest son in 4 days, because a purchased evaluation said my mind was gone, and a stroke guaranteed I couldn't contradict it. By March, Robert had put Harlan Construction on the market. A regional competitor, Meridian Building Partners, acquired it for $9 million. The company had been independently appraised at $13.6 million just 18 months prior. Robert sold my life's work for 66 cents on the dollar. He didn't want fair value. He wanted it fast, the way someone fleeing a scene moves, not carefully, just quickly before anything changes, except I was not unconscious. I was watching every single transaction happen from a hospital bed, and then from a room with a number on the door. Sandra received $3.1 million. Robert kept $4.6 million, plus the family property on Lakeview Road. The house Eleanor and I designed ourselves in 1980, the house my children grew up in. Thomas received nothing. The man who had organized my supply room at 15, poured concrete at 22, managed 7-figure contracts by 32, and spent the better part of 2 decades building Harlan Construction alongside me. Nothing, because he had stood in a courtroom and refused to go along with it. And Robert made certain that refusal had consequences. They transferred me to Clearview Senior Care in April 2018. Room 4. Robert selected the facility, $4,500 a month, drawn from what remains of my personal accounts Robert controls through guardianship, over a man who can now speak clearly, walk unassisted, prepare his own meals, and complete the daily crossword in under 15 minutes. I have been fully competent for 6 years. I am as sharp as the day I poured my first foundation in 1974. And I am sitting in room 4 because the legal process moves at a different speed than the truth, and theft moves faster than both. Thomas comes every Sunday, drives 90 minutes from Dayton. He lost his home in 2020. The legal costs of contesting the guardianship consumed everything he had set aside, over $190,000, trying to get his father back. My son rents a small apartment now and works as a project supervisor for another contractor, a man less qualified than Thomas to manage the crews he manages. The person who should be running Harlan Construction is now working for someone else's company because he decided I mattered more than the money. I never asked him to make that choice. He made it because it was the only choice Thomas Harlan knew how to make, and that is the exact reason I left him the company to begin with. Robert has not come in 5 years. Sandra visited once, about 18 months ago. She sat in the chair by the window for half an hour, never quite looked at me directly, and said, "Dad, None of this was meant to hurt you. 4.6 million for Robert, 3.1 for Sandra. My company, my home, my legal standing, not meant to hurt me. Let me tell you something about people who say they never meant to cause harm. They caused it. They simply cannot hold the full weight of what they chose, so they soften the language. I spent 4 decades in business. I have sat across from difficult people in difficult rooms. I know what intentional looks like. This was not careless. This was calculated, carried out by people who shared my last name. 6 weeks ago, Thomas called on a Monday evening. His voice had a tension in it I recognized, the kind a person carries when they've been holding something significant for a long time. He said, "Dad, Dr. Crane passed away in September. His son was sorting through his professional files and came across something. Dr. Crane's son, a man named Paul, had found a folder marked Harlan in his father's records. Inside was the original cognitive evaluation, and attached to it, a handwritten letter from Robert, dated August 9th, 2017, along with a payment record for $38,000. Thomas read it to me word for word, and I am going to give it to you the same way, because these words need to be spoken plainly. The letter said, "Dr. Crane, please find the enclosed payment as agreed upon. The evaluation should document meaningful decline. My father's current will does not align with the family's expectations, and this represents the only viable path to a resolution." The only viable path to a resolution. My son reduced me to a problem he needed to solve. 43 years of my life, a name built from manual labor and early mornings and kept promises, and he called taking it all away a resolution. I taught him how to shake hands. I put him through school. I gave him a reputation he inherited without earning a single day of it. And he wrote that removing me was the solution. Paul Crane forwarded copies to Thomas, to my court-appointed guardian, and to the Franklin County District Attorney's Office. Thomas's attorney filed an emergency motion to vacate the guardianship order and restore my full legal rights. The hearing is scheduled for 5 weeks from now. Thomas came last Sunday. Same chair, same drive. He read the motion documents to me, cover to cover. When he finished, he set the papers on his knee and said, "Dad, I need you to hear something. I have been carrying this for years, not anger at Robert, anger at myself. I was in the building the day your stroke happened. I'm the one who found you, and I have never stopped thinking about those 35 minutes. What if I had gone in earlier?" I told him, "Thomas, don't. You were the one in that courtroom. You spent every dollar you had. You are here every single Sunday without fail. You do not get to apologize for any of that. Not to me." He said, "I just needed to get you out of there." I said, "You are getting me out. You're the only one who ever tried." Robert's legal team contacted Thomas last week, not Robert, his attorneys, inquiring whether there was openness to discussing a private settlement. My son engineered a fraudulent medical assessment, stripped me of my legal rights, sold 43 years of my work below market value, transferred me to a facility he picked out, and now he wants a discussion. I told Thomas to inform Robert's counsel that Frank Harlan's discussions now go directly through the district attorney's office. I am 88 years old. I am not diminished, and I will not be managed any further. Sandra left Thomas a voicemail 3 days ago. She was crying. She said she had no knowledge of the payment to Dr. Crane, that she never knew. Maybe that is true. Maybe she signed the petition, accepted $3.1 million, and simply chose not to ask where any of it came from or who it cost. I have thought about it. I am not sure which reveals more about a person, engineering the crime or walking through the open door, pocketing your share and deciding not to look back. Room 4, nearly 7 years, 5 weeks until the hearing. Thomas will be in that courtroom. He will stand up the same way he stood up the first time, except now he has the letter, the payment record, a dead doctor's private files, and a district attorney who has read all of it. I am 88 years old. I may not be present for the end of this, but Thomas will be, and that man has not let me down once in 51 years. Not once. If every foundation I poured, every contract I signed, every structure I raised from bare ground disappears, if all of it is gone, I still built something no one can take to market and undervalue. I built Thomas, and there is no price on that.